I always begin by telling people that, I was born and raised in the Caribbean in St. Lucia. I left that, which actually really informs, I think, my the way in which I sort of view the world and navigate it as ostensibly as an entrepreneur. Because when you're an immigrant coming to the country, you are trying to sort of manifest certain things with very limited resources. So that's really what being an entrepreneur is all about. I saw my parents trying to make things happen in many interesting ways. So born and raised in St. Lucia till I was the age of 6 and I came to the United States. As a child, I was really obsessed with zoology. By the way, I think that actually matters here because that actually lends itself to in very interesting ways around programming. Most people don't realize that the person who actually developed object-oriented programming was a molecular biologist. That's why you have these terms like polymorphism, inheritance, and I'm geeking out already, Lori, so just bear with me. But,
No, it's
so they
always.
sort of naturally lend themselves, but I was obsessed with zoology, and my idols growing up were Jane Goodall and Diane Fossey, and so I desperately wanted to be a zoologist. And then when I got to college, the immigrant framework, my parents were like, no, doctor, lawyer, engineer, my friend, those are your choices. So anyway, I would say the thing that sort of was formative for me was primarily when I graduated from college, there were two things that were occurring. I graduated in 1997, right? So there are two things that were occurring. One is the human genome was being mapped, and we had the dot-com boom, the dot-com surge. You had always, the internet started taking off. And I was working in a lab. I was doing genetic research at Rockefeller University as well as at Cornell. And I remember I was working on these microarrays that's basically doing like what I call single nucleotide polymorphisms, trying to do early scanning of genetic information. And I'm realizing that this stuff has to be automated at some point. It's very manually doing these things. That's number one. Number two, all my friends were heading out to Silicon Valley starting up companies. Like, well, what's happening over here? And a friend invited me to come and learn more about their company. And so I did that. And I remember I felt terrible because I was working with this fantastic professor, Dr. Suzanne Thran, remarkable man. And I remember he said something to me, which Lori stayed with me to this day. And I told him about the opportunity. I said, listen, I'm not sure if I'm going to pursue a career anymore in molecular genetics. There's this amazing thing happening out here, out west, literally and figuratively. He said something to me. He said, one cannot expect to find the pearl by sitting at the edge of the ocean. I thought that was remarkable, really profound. I mean, literally, you have to sort of jump in. That's the only way that you find out. So I traded in my lab coat. I went out west and I never looked back. And that was seminal for me. And it was my first immersion into tech, but more importantly, the way in which I started thinking about things, which really comes full circle now. I started thinking about them in sort of biological constructs, in terms of we're learning about code, but you think about the primary code in the world is the genetic code, and the genetic code is really designed to create three-dimensional structures, which are basically proteins, and proteins are the fundamental building blocks of life. So this whole notion of you have code that's creating infrastructure that's autonomous. Everyone talks about AI. The real AI, by the way, is called nature. Like what's governing, what allows our immune system to then create memory cells. I mean, so that's always been an interesting framework for me. It really ties into a lot of work that we're doing, which is around infrastructure. The biggest movement right now is this whole notion of infrastructure as code, that you're writing code that's spinning up infrastructure. So those analogs have been really helpful for me to think about these new systems.